Listen carefully. This is not something you casually stumbled upon. You've passed thousands of videos before this. You've ignored messages, scrolled past reminders, closed tabs without thinking twice. But this one held you, and that matters. If you're hearing this, it's because you're finally ready to understand something that confused you for a long time. You're ready to understand why the pain cut so deep, why it lingered, why it didn't resolve quickly the way you hoped it would. This is not background noise. This is not motivation for entertainment. This is a moment of clarity, and moments like this don't repeat themselves often. You didn't just go through pain. You went through selection. And until you understand that, you'll keep questioning yourself instead of stepping forward. So stay with me. What you're about to hear will realign how you see your past and unlock what you're meant to do next. 1. The pain was assigned, not random. You didn't suffer because you were weak. You suffered because you could carry it. That distinction matters more than you realize, because most people misunderstand pain completely. They assume pain shows where someone is broken. In reality, pain often shows where someone is strong enough to be tested. Pain is not distributed equally. It never has been. It's assigned. Storms don't hit everything the same way. A strong wind doesn't bother what's low to the ground. It targets what stands tall, what rises above its surroundings, what interrupts the landscape. That's how pressure works. It looks for resistance. It looks for height. It looks for substance. And that's why the weight fell on you. Most people are given comfort. You were given pressure. Most people are given reassurance. You were given silence. Most people are given applause. You were given isolation, not because you were forgotten, not because you were overlooked, but because comfort would have weakened you, reassurance would have distracted you, and applause would have made you dependent. At the time, you didn't know that. All you knew was confusion. You watched others move forward with less effort while you struggled quietly. You saw people receive support while you carried everything alone. You noticed how easily some were celebrated while your effort went unseen, and slowly, without realizing it, you turned inward. You started asking the wrong questions. What did I do wrong? Why is this so hard for me? Why does it feel like I'm me? Is perm always the one tested? Is there something broken in me? Those questions didn't come from truth. They came from exhaustion. When pressure lasts too long without explanation, the mind looks for blame, and when it can't find an external reason, it turns on the self. You questioned your worth. You questioned your direction. You questioned your timing. You wondered if you were behind, delayed, or simply not enough. But here is the correction you were never given, and it changes everything. If that pain was meant to destroy you, it would have succeeded. If it was meant to break you, you would not still be standing. Pain that is meant to end someone does not pause. It does not negotiate. It does not leave survivors. The fact that you endured it is not an accident. The fact that you adapted is not luck. The fact that you are still here is evidence. You weren't spared pain because sparing you would have limited you. You were given pain because something in you could absorb it, learn from it, and transform under it. That pain was not chaos. It had structure. It wasn't stack cruelty. It was pressure with purpose. Every moment you thought was breaking you was actually testing your capacity. Every situation that forced you to stand alone was strengthening your internal stability. Every season of silence was teaching you how to move without validation. You didn't just survive the pain, you were shaped by it. And the shaping process is never gentle. Stone isn't set carved with soft hands. Steel isn't strengthened without heat. Character isn't set. Built-in comfort. What you experienced was not random suffering. It was a filtering process. It was life asking a question, over and over again. Can you carry more? Can you endure without losing yourself? Can you stay grounded when nothing is fair? And every time, even when you doubted yourself, you answered yes by staying. That is why you are here now. Not because the pain ended, but because it completed its first assignment. It didn't come to destroy you, it came to shape you. And now, for the first time, you're beginning to understand that. 2. Why you didn't step break when others did. Here's something you may not have noticed about yourself, because when you're inside the struggle, perspective disappears. You didn't set break when others did. You watched people fall apart under pressure that barely compares to what you carried. You saw others quit when they were misunderstood. Once, while you were misunderstood for years, you saw people collapse under rejection, while you learned how to function through it. And yet, no one called you strong. No one handed you a medal. No one acknowledged the weight you were carrying. So instead of recognizing your endurance, you normalized it. You told yourself, this is just life. You told yourself, others have it worse. You told yourself, I'll deal with it later. But what you were actually doing was adapting at a level most people never reach. Most people need encouragement to move forward. You learned to move without it. Most people need validation to stay consistent. You learned discipline without praise. Most people need support to remain stable. You learned how to self-regulate under pressure. That didn't happen by accident. Pressure reveals what comfort hides. And what pressure revealed in you was capacity. Capacity doesn't look dramatic. It looks quiet. It looks like showing up even when motivation is gone. It looks like holding your emotions together when no one is listening. It looks like continuing forward while carrying questions you don't yet have answers to. There were moments you wanted to quit. Moments you were tired of being the responsible one. Moments you wondered why you were always the one expected to handle it. But you didn't collapse. You adjusted. That adjustment is strength. Most people never develop. You learned how to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. You learned how to process pain internally instead of projecting it outward. You learned how to stay composed even when things felt unfair. And yes, it cost you. It cost you softness. It cost you innocence. It cost you the ability to be careless. But it gave you something far more valuable. It gave you depth. Depth is what allows someone to lead without dominating, to endure without becoming bitter, to see clearly when emotions run high. Depth is what allows someone to walk into heavier responsibility without being crushed by it. That's why your journey didn't look like everyone else's. Others were learning how to be comfortable. You were learning how to be steady. Others were being taught how to enjoy life. You were being taught how to survive it without losing your integrity. And here's the part that matters. You didn't stay strong because you were fearless. You stayed strong because you learned how to keep going even while afraid. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's movement in spite of it. Every time you chose to stay disciplined when it would have been easier to disengage, you were building something invisible. Every time you chose restraint instead of reaction, you were strengthening internal control. Every time you chose patience over impulsiveness, you were training long-term focus. That's why you didn't break. Not because life was easier for you, but because life was training you differently. And now, whether you realize it or not, you carry a level of emotional strength, awareness and endurance that most people around you do not possess. You just didn't have the words for it yet. But you were beginning to see it now. And this realization changes how you understand everything that comes next. 3. Misunderstanding the process cost you peace. For a long time, the hardest part wasn't the pain itself. It was not knowing why it was happening. When pain has no explanation, the mind fills in the gaps. And most of the time, it fills them with self-blame. You didn't have a framework for what you were experiencing, so you assumed the worst about yourself. You told yourself the struggle meant you were behind. You assumed the silence meant you were forgotten. You interpreted the resistance as a sign that you weren't meant for more. That misunderstanding quietly stole your peace. Instead of seeing preparation, you saw rejection. Instead of seeing refinement, you saw failure. Instead of seeing timing, you saw delay. And the longer that misunderstanding lasted, the heavier everything felt. You kept going, but without clarity. You kept trying, but without rest. You kept pushing forward while internally questioning whether it was even worth it. That kind of effort drains you, not because you're weak, but because effort without understanding feels endless. When you don't know what something is building, it starts to feel like punishment. So you resisted the very thing that was strengthening you. You tried to rush past the process. You tried to make sense of it too early. You tried to force outcomes before you were internally ready to sustain them. And none of it brought relief. Because growth doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to alignment. The moment you stop fighting the process and start understanding it, something shifts inside you. The same experiences that once felt heavy begin to feel purposeful. The same delays that frustrated you begin to make sense. Clarity does that. Clarity doesn't erase pain, but it changes your relationship to it. When you understand why something hurt, it loses its power to control you. It stops replaying in your mind as unresolved confusion. You stop asking for closure from people who were never meant to provide it. You stop revisiting conversations that no longer matter. You stop trying to explain yourself to those who couldn't hear you anyway. And slowly, without forcing it, peace returns. Not because everything is fixed, but because everything is understood. You realize you weren't being pushed away. You were being pulled forward. You weren't being delayed. You were being stabilized. You weren't being punished. You were being prepared. That realization is not small. It's the difference between carrying pain and carrying wisdom. Once you understand the process, you stop resenting the past. You stop wishing you could undo things that shaped you. You stop asking for your old life back, because you see now that your old life couldn't have held the person you're becoming. And that understanding, quiet, steady, and grounded, is what restores your peace. 4. The truth about attachment and loss. Some of what hurt you didn't hurt because it was cruel. It hurt because you were attached. Attached to people who felt familiar, even when they were no longer aligned with who you were becoming. Attached to roles you had outgrown. Attached to versions of yourself that once helped you survive but could not follow you forward. Attachment doesn't announce itself as weakness. It disguises itself as loyalty, patience, hope, and commitment. You told yourself you were being understanding. You told yourself you were being strong. You told yourself you were just giving things more time. But deep down, you felt the tension. You felt conversations start to feel heavier. You felt effort become one-sided. You felt yourself shrinking in places where you once expanded. You sensed that something was no longer right, but you stayed because leaving felt like loss. And then loss came anyway. That's the part that confused you. You thought staying would protect you from pain, but staying only delayed it. When attachment outlives alignment, pain becomes unavoidable, not as punishment, but as correction. Then it is often the sound of attachment breaking. And yes, it hurts. Because attachment creates identity. It makes people, places, and routines feel like extensions of who you are. When those things begin to fall away, it feels like you're losing parts of yourself. But what you were actually losing was limitation. You couldn't carry what's next in your life while holding on to what was familiar. The weight didn't come from the future. It came from the past you were trying to keep. Some people weren't removed to hurt you. They were removed because they would have delayed you. Some doors didn't close to reject you. They closed because they would have kept you small. You sensed this before it happened. You felt the discomfort. You noticed the subtle misalignment. You ignored it at first, because separation feels harsh, and growth often asks for more honesty than comfort allows. So the pressure increased, not to punish you, but to move you. Pressure exposes attachment. It forces decisions you might otherwise avoid. It clarifies what no longer fits. It makes staying more painful than leaving. That's why the loss felt sudden, even if the signs were there for a long time. And here sits the part you need to hear clearly. Letting go doesn't mean what you had was meaningless. It means it completed its role. Some connections are meant to support a season, not a lifetime. Some versions of yourself are meant to protect you temporarily, not define you forever. You didn't fail at holding on. You succeeded at outgrowing. And once you understand that, the loss stops feeling like rejection and starts feeling like release. A release that made space for what sets next. 5. What the pain changed in you. If you look closely, you'll notice something important. You are not the same person you were before the pain. Not in the dramatic way people talk about transformation, but in quieter, more permanent ways. The kind of changes that don't announce themselves, but reshape how you move through the world. You see more clearly now. You notice patterns faster. You recognize misalignment earlier. You sense when something is off, before it fully reveals itself. That's not overthinking. That's discernment earned through experience. You tolerate less nonsense. Not because you become cold, but because you've learned the cost of emotional waste. You no longer have the energy to explain yourself repeatedly, to fix what others refuse to take responsibility for, or to carry burdens that aren't yours. You don't chase attention the way you used to. You've seen how unreliable external validation is. You've learned that applause fades quickly, and approval is conditional. What once felt necessary now feels optional, and that shift matters. You don't beg to be understood anymore. You don't overextend to prove your worth. You don't abandon your boundaries just to keep the peace. That isn't set ego. That sets maturity. Pain has a way of removing illusions. It strips away the belief that everyone will meet you with the same depth you offer. It teaches you to conserve your energy and invest it where it actually grows. You've become more selective, not just with people, but with your time, your focus, and your emotional access. That selectiveness is not selfishness, it's self-respect shaped by experience. You also developed a quiet strength. You don't panic the way you used to when things feel uncertain. You've been through enough to know that confusion doesn't mean collapse. You've learned how to remain steady when answers don't arrive immediately. That steadiness didn't come from comfort. It came from endurance. Chosen ones don't live easier lives. They live heavier ones, lives that require emotional range, restraint, and responsibility. And meaning always comes with weight. The pain didn't break you, it refined you. The silence didn't erase you, it centered you. The delay didn't deny you, it positioned you. Nothing was wasted. Every difficult moment rewired how you respond to life. Every disappointment sharpened your judgment. Every season of being overlooked strengthened your internal grounding. You may not have recognized it while it was happening, but you are becoming someone capable of carrying more. And now, whether you fully accept it yet or not, that change is permanent. You can't go back to who you were before the pain, and you shouldn't want to. Because who you are now is stronger, clearer, and more grounded than you've ever been. 6. Why this moment matters now. Understanding why it hurt is not just about healing the past. It's about what you do next. Because insight without movement turns into stagnation. And stagnation is subtle. It doesn't feel like failure. It feels like waiting too long after you're already ready. Here's the truth most people avoid. Not every moment is neutral. Some moments are transitional, and missing them doesn't cause collapse. It causes delay. You are standing in one of those moments now. The clarity you're gaining didn't arrive randomly. It came after enough pressure, enough loss, enough internal restructuring. That means the preparation phase is ending, and the application phase is beginning. And application requires action. If you treat this moment casually, you risk slipping back into old patterns, not because they're right, but because they're familiar. Familiarity is comfortable, even when it's limiting. That's why urgency matters. Some doors respond to readiness, not intention. Some opportunities appear briefly, not permanently. Some alignments require decisiveness, not hesitation. This doesn't mean rushing blindly. It means recognizing when waiting is no longer wisdom. You've already done the hard part. You have endured. You've reflected. You've adjusted internally. Now comes the part that separates those who grow from those who stay aware but unchanged. Integration. Using what you've learned instead of revisiting what you've survived. Choosing alignment over explanation. Direction over reassurance. This is where many people stall. They keep reviewing the pain because it feels productive. They keep analyzing the past because it feels safer than stepping forward. But reflection has diminishing returns once clarity arrives. At some point, understanding must turn into embodiment. You are being asked right now to stop romanticizing the struggle and start applying the wisdom it produced. Use the discernment you earned. Use the boundaries you learned to hold. Use the emotional control you developed under pressure. Because what comes next in your life will not respond to who you were, it will respond to who you've become. And if you hesitate too long, you risk meeting new opportunities with old hesitation. This moment matters because it marks a shift, from survival to direction, from processing to positioning, from preparation to responsibility. And whether you move forward intentionally or drift back unconsciously is a decision only you can make. But make no mistake, this moment will not wait forever. 7. Activation. Step into alignment. This is where everything comes together, not in noise, not in drama, but in decision. Alignment doesn't arrive with a loud announcement. It shows up as quiet certainty, as the moment you realize you're no longer available for what drains you, distracts you, or pulls you backward. You don't need permission to step forward anymore. You don't need validation to move. You don't need everyone to understand you. You are already been shaped. The pain refined you. The silence centered you. The delay positioned you. Nothing was wasted. And now, because you understand what the pain was doing, you can stop carrying it like a burden and start carrying it like wisdom. This is your activation. Activation is not about becoming someone new. It's about accepting who you already are and acting from that place. It's about letting your choices reflect your growth instead of your wounds. You don't move the same way you used to, and you shouldn't. You don't tolerate the same dynamics. You don't negotiate your values. You don't chase what once consumed your energy. You move with clarity now. And clarity demands follow-through. That means choosing direction even when it costs comfort. Choosing discipline over distraction. Choosing alignment over approval. There will be moments when stepping forward feels lonely. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're no longer walking where everyone else is. You were not shaped for the crowd. You were shaped for responsibility. Stand up internally, not with aggression, not with ego, but with grounded certainty, the kind that doesn't argue, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. Say it to yourself, quietly and honestly, I understand now. I see what it was doing. And Seppo ready for what Sep's next. That acknowledgement seals the process. And if this message reached you at the right moment, don't dismiss it. Engage with it intentionally. Comment something simple. I understand now, not for visibility, but as a declaration of alignment. Stay connected, not out of habit, but out of purpose. This isn't set the end of the message, it sets the beginning of your application. You are no longer who you were before the pain, and you are ready to move forward, clearly, deliberately, and without hesitation. Take a breath and sit with this for a moment. You don't need to rush back into noise. You don't need to explain what you've realized. Let it settle. You now understand why it hurts so much. And because you understand, it no longer controls you. The pain did its work. The process completed its assignment. What remains is clarity, and clarity is power when you act from it. From this point forward, move differently, not louder, not harder, more deliberately. Let your choices reflect what you've learned, not what you've lost. You were not broken by what you went through. You were calibrated, and what comes next will meet you at the level you're finally standing on. Stay aligned, stay aware, stay grounded. You stay ready.